that. I'm so flattered, Ross. Thank you so much, my friend. And thank you, Rutgers, for inviting me. Thank you, students in front of me, and thank you, students who are out there virtually. While Ross was introducing me, I think I re-embedded the slideshow. Mike, we're good? Do you think?
I think so. Let me check with the students on.
Okay, they should be able to expand it and make it full screen, and that would be easier, I think. Should be a little flip book, so and everybody will have that. So, are we good to start? Everybody okay?
Yeah. Do you
Yes,
want
sir.
the lights dim?
Oh, yeah, you might want to turn the lights down. I was going to say it's a little fuzzy up there.
Yeah, I think that would be better for some of the film
Yeah,
too.
just,
Yes.
just watch how much you dim them.
There are questions already. This is great. All right.
I also wanted to say we're tweeting the event at hashtag LIS502, and Kate's going to be primarily tweeting.
Okay, can't wait to see the stream. Okay, and I think this bracelet's going to be too much noise. So, all right, so I don't know about you, but when I watch films with my husband, he's watching them for different reasons. He watches them for the story, and we just recently saw Flight, Denzel Washington in Flight, and my husband was watching it because he's an amateur pilot. He likes technology. I watch films for different reasons. For me, I'm always seeing an information literacy experience, regardless of the film. And so what I want to do with you today is look at the notion of transliteracy, but I want to look at it through the lens of a film director. And I want to see how some classic films inform our understanding of the notion of transliteracy. And so I bring you Transliteracy, an Unintentional Film Fest. And so let's see if this works. All right, so today, this is all contact information. You won't need to take notes. Everything I have is out there. The most important link on this list is Joyce with AT, not the @ Rutgers.wikispaces.com. And everything I'm talking about, you'll be able to find there at that wiki later. And this slide will come around again at the end, so if you've missed it, don't worry. The other thing, as Ross mentioned, is we're going to be talking about a lot of things. And I understand that everybody has a different size popcorn container. So figure out what the size you want to use tonight will be, and recognize that the machine will always be popping. And you'll be able to go back and fill another container later on. So the definition of transliteracy. Briefly, it's the ability to read, write, and interact across a range of platforms, tools, and media. That's the way I think about it. And I understand that at the Knowledge Cafe, you folks were thinking about various different definitions, but let's just use this today. And let's look at it through the lens of a director of learning. And let's look at how the teacher librarian, or the librarian in a larger sense, can direct learning and transliteracy. So I was thinking about this poster I did a few months ago, what do teacher librarians teach? And I just decided to edit it for direct for the purpose of this little workshop. And the first part of this I'd like to think about is, what does it look like from the point of view of a transliterate citizen, a compassionate digital citizen? And for this, I'd like to bring you to this film that's a favorite of mine.
What's that supposed to do? Run away?
No, you're not supposed to run away, but people, you're changing. I know I'm going to do exactly the same thing at your age.
No, not exactly.
Here, these are the years when a man changes into the man he's going to become the rest of his life. Just be careful who you change into. This guy, Flash Thompson, he probably deserved what happened. But just because you can beat him up, doesn't give you the right to. Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
So I got that metaphor from Henry Jenkins. Henry Jenkins tells us that Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, is a prototype for today's youth. He engages in play with an avatar. He wants to contribute to adult society by being a photojournalist. He interacts with people of all ages. He's kind of in love with Mary Jane or MJ, and he wants to be in constant contact with her. He's learning to use his emerging powers. He sometimes makes mistakes, but he really wants to be, and he can be, a hero. I think most of our kids are like that, ultimately. And I think that our role as adults and teacher librarians specifically, and librarians who work with youth, we can be Uncle Ben in a whole bunch of different ways, and we'll touch upon some of those ways in a bit. These are a few things I think about every day as the movie in my own library kind of runs by me. I think about how kids can learn to manage their reputations online. I think about how 90s resumes are right now. I think about public being the new default. And I also glory in the fact that I've learned more talking to strangers in the last 2 years than I've learned in my entire 58 years on this planet. And I'm hoping that that stream is an example of how that kind of learning happens spontaneously and real time. I think that the new business card is Google and Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr and Rebel Mouse, more than that print card that we used to hand to each other. I think that we need in our schools to be thinking about how do we help kids develop electronic portfolios. Helen Barrett is one of the leaders in this kind of work, but as I see it, it shouldn't be the classroom teacher who does this kind of leadership. It ought to be the librarian who kind of ranges across subject disciplines and age levels and can have kids, help kids create work, reflect on work, store their work in an effective platform, and have that work follow them when they leave K-12 and move into adult life. But unfortunately, we're not really that involved in digital portfolios yet. And so when my students search themselves, what they find is photographs that look like this. Because in most K-12 schools, what we've done is we've removed the last name of a student from almost all of their great work. And so what's left is just the social stuff. And I think we really need to rethink the notion of an academic digital portfolio. And our kids are making some mistakes, and Dana Boyd tells us that we should hope that we can help them when we're with them. We help them through those Band-Aid kinds of mistakes. It's a process that's part of growing up, and by and large, most of these mistakes will be the type that create only social bruises, not lifelong horrors. We teach our children to drive, even though there's the potential for accidents, because we know it's critical to their future. We also need to teach our children to navigate mediated social environments, because this too is critical to their future. They need to know how to interact in public. And so studies that came out recently show us how important this is. This particular study was done by Kaplan, and what it recognizes is that the folks who are the admissions officers at the universities are now digging deeply into students' social networking profiles. So all things being equal, 2 students with the same 4.0 GPO are going to be judged partly by their social networking profiles. So what do you look like on Twitter? What do you look like on Facebook? You need to start thinking about that as you start applying for university, but possibly way before that. This is an article that came out a few weeks ago about the same thing happening with medical school. Medical students are being judged by their Twitter profiles as they apply. And so what's happening at my school is we're struggling with this because I think everything is kind of shifting for us. I've been teaching about how to use hashtags effectively for real-time research, but the kids started using hashtags and @ in different ways, and this is not uncommon. Actually this was last spring. The students decided to start an @ and use the hashtag Springfield Problems. And what they did was they criticized everything about our school and everything about our teachers. They even said nasty things about our teachers' children. And the kids didn't realize that adults were actually reading this Twitter stream. people were really hurt. And I think the students thought this was really invisible to the adult world. When we started confronting them with what we were reading, they were shocked. And we were shocked because the students who were the most active part of this Twitter stream were the students who were the leaders in our No Place for Hate Club. When we faced them and talked to them, we really weren't getting through because this was their landscape, this was their playground, and we were invading it. But we had to talk to them about the fact that they were hurting people face to face, and some of these students we had to bring to tears because we had to show them how hurt we were, and they just didn't get it at first. Another thing that was going on in our school, unfortunately, was that we actually had 2 suicides this semester. And in both cases, there was a trail of Twitter evidence that the students who committed suicide were troubled. In fact, they left a final tweet with information about what they were going to do. I'm worried about this, and I don't know how to make sense out of it. I've archived the stream that happened before the event, and I archived the sympathy tweets that were happening after. What was especially odd to me was we set up the library as a triage grief center. And although we had adult counselors there to listen to the kids, and for one of the young men, his mother was our school secretary and his brother was on the football team. And his father coached football for the community. So everybody was affected, the whole school district. The kids, instead of talking to the counselors and instead of talking to each other, went back on Twitter and just started tweeting out the same stuff over and over again. They were not learning and helping each other in the community. They didn't write sympathy cards to the family. This was a place where they were just leaving some kind of mark. And I think we need to start understanding this part of digital culture. And I would love to talk about this after we do this workshop, because I really want to be able to understand this better. I'm troubled by it. The fact is that everything our kids do really is on a new type of permanent record. And I think the best thing, and this is from Seth Godin's blog, and he says the best plan is to overload Google with a long tail of good stuff and to always act as if you're on candid camera, because you really are. And I think that's really important. And in response to the sorts of things I was talking about, because it's not only happening in my small suburban high school, this is happening all over. This is Osseo High School that has been getting an awful lot of press because the captain of the football team was fed up with all the nasty stuff his friends were putting out on Twitter. And he started something called Osseo Nice Things. And this is spreading also, and that's the good news. The kids are doing some wonderful things and some not so nice things. Just like who? Peter Parker. And so what I think has got to happen is Uncle Bens of the world have to help kids negotiate behavior in all of these different types of social networks. Kids, one of the things I do with the students is I actually have them look at their social networking profiles. We have the kids search themselves. But it's not good enough to search yourself with Google. And it's not good enough to set up a Google alert on yourself, because there are tools that reach way deeper than that. A new one is called Zopio, and if your name isn't John Smith, try searching your name on Zopio and see where that will take you. Another one is People, P-I-P-L, but this is a relatively new one, and it kind of arranges your entire life as a little magazine. Another issue I've been facing, and I was facing this very deeply today, is what Howard Rangel calls infotension, especially in a bring-your-own-device environment. The students who come into our schools are bringing their own laptops and their own tablets, and very often they feel entitled to be on them every minute, even when you're having the most exciting story happening in your classroom or the best presentation. And so what we're seeing is a kind of addiction, And some people call it FOMO. Have you heard of FOMO? The Pew Research Institute referred to it probably late last year, and it's called fear of missing out. Kids are obsessed with missing something that's happening in their personal friendship environment. Another thing that they've called this is nomophobia, and a lot of people felt this during Sandy. It's an addiction to your mobile device and a terrible fear of it disappearing from your grasp, either by loss or by lack of juice. And so nomophobia and FOMO are things that people are talking about. And I'm seeing this with my kids. We took their cell phones away today so that they could take the Pennsylvania assessment, and they were freaked out that their cell phones were beneath their tables in an envelope. You could see some of them really nervous. Another thing that I think about as I look at the director's lens for our students is the respect for intellectual property, and I'm celebrating so much of the new teaching we can do in that arena. We probably don't want them to model this behavior. Okay, well, if you didn't see that, that was a very small clip of the hacking scene from Social Network. There are, well, Zuckerberg may not be the best model, and he might have gotten away with an awful lot that may have been unethical, but we also have a lot of other models in our culture where people have suffered as a result of their unethical behavior relating to intellectual property. In fact, Turnitin is created a taxonomy of new types of plagiarism, which is really interesting. And I think it would be useful to share this with teachers, because I think largely teachers are unaware of the new types of plagiarism that we're seeing. And what Turnitin did was they assessed these types of plagiarism in terms of frequency and the level of the problem. And this is very, very different from what it looked like when I was in school. We have new strategies for citation that I think my kids have grasped and are in love with. And I'm absolutely in love with the idea of social sharing of documents. How many of you are users of Mendeley? And I'm excited about them. Zotero is another great one. I'm working on building the YALSA research bibliography using Mendeley, and if anybody else is interested in youth information seeking behavior, I really encourage you to join my group and share the research that you think should be in that official bibliography. And so I'd like to open that out and make it more transparent. Now, although I'm excited about that social scholarship, I'm also watching kids in social scholarship environments. So this is EasyBib, and one of the things EasyBib did recently, and I was consulting with them for a while, was they decided, in addition to their really lovely citation service, that they were going to make it very easy for students to see each other's works cited. And when I first started talking with them, they said, oh, it's going to be great, it's going to be great. They're going to have all the citations. Say they're working on the Cold War, they'll be able to take, kind of view everybody else's bibliography on the Cold War. And I said, well, are you putting the students' annotations up too, because you offer a box for annotations? And they said, absolutely, we're going to put them up because kids will benefit from that. And then I said to them, do you realize that you are a citation service, you're advocating respect for intellectual property, but those annotations that are written by the students, that's an intellectual property as well. And then they said to me, well, they signed off on that in the agreement. And I thought, gee, that's a little bit dishonest. In any case, what disturbs me with this is my students are now taking the bibliographies of other students and they're using them as if they were their own. When my school in our little wealthy, affluent suburban Philadelphia, we have resources galore, and they're taking the bibliography of somebody who may not have the ebooks and databases and print collection that I've gotten. So this is another thing I think we need to look out for, a different type of plagiarism. You guys all still with me? Okay. All right, I celebrate every day the growth of the Creative Commons. How many of you teach with Creative Commons and you're in love with it too? Okay. Well, I was doing a workshop for principals at the University of Pennsylvania on Saturday. Not one of those folks in the leadership program had ever even heard of Creative Commons. And so we have a lot of teaching to do. If you go to my LibGuides, you'll see that my kids have a whole bunch of resources that we continue to grow relating to Creative Commons portals, and I think that's the one type of curation that librarians really need to do. I absolutely am in love with Flickr's Creative Commons page because it really is a lovely teaching tool. You can teach about what each of these individual licenses do. This one is the most liberal, the attribution only, the non-commercial, no non-derivative, and the share-alike. And my students know these icons, these logos, just like they know the sign for the ladies' room and the men's room, honestly. And they use them all the time. This is probably my favorite Creative Commons portal, and as I walk around the library every day, this is probably one of the screens. There's YouTube, there's Wikipedia probably, there's a library webpage, and then there's Flickr Blue Mountain, because it's so handy. The result list looks like that. There's a matrix of beautiful images, and the students go directly into Aviary so they can edit the image directly from Blue Mountain. And I love it. And I love Wileo as a blogger. When I use Wileo, I search for an image and get immediate embed code, and the attribution goes right into my blog with the image, and I don't need to do any work at all. Love that. And I love Flickerstorm because I can create a tray of images that are safe for young students, and it will be given a lovely little URL, and that's super easy. And with our students producing media, I want to lead them to Creative Commons music as well. And this is, Jamendo is just one portal that leads them to lots of great stuff. And you can search it by the genres by meta tag. And we're using an awful lot of world music in our Peace Corps simulation. YouTube recently put up a Creative Commons search. And probably out of all this stuff, this is the most important. Creative Commons is not just for students to use media, but for them to attribute a license to their own creative work. And over the last few months, Creative Commons put this new wizard out so that when students are making their own digital stories, it's very, very easy for them to determine how they want their own work used. Now, although I celebrate Creative Commons, and this is a beautiful Creative Commons image of a Native American woman and her child, sometimes Creative Commons just doesn't do it all for me. And so I need to think about the notion of fair use. If I were doing a project that had to do with how Native Americans were treated in the media over the last 50 years, that image would not do it for me. I would need to use copyrighted images. And so I can, under the notion of fair use. And I think one of the things we need to teach kids about is how to exercise their fair use muscle. Now today, I bet some of you are wondering how I'm using these copyrighted media clips. Well, I believe that quoting is not just for text anymore. Right? I think that if you use media in a way that is transformative, that adds value, that somehow changes the original creative work, that you can claim fair use. And other people agree with me. There are these new codes of practice that were developed, the codes of practice for fair use in media literacy education, in online teaching, in open courseware. And these are things that, as librarians, we need to be aware of and to be able to share with the communities of practitioners that we work with. And we need to also be aware of the notion of transmedia storytelling. This particular story was in public domain, but our kids can use media to create new works. And I think one of my favorite ways to teach about it is to show American universities' list of examples of what might be fair use. And so what they've done is they've given you examples of the categories of fair use, and they've provided these little videos. So satire and parody is one of the ways my students often remix. Negative or critical commentary, book reviews that we put on the morning news and announcement. Positive commentary, quoting in order to start a discussion. And I think that's really what I'm doing here in this presentation. Illustration or example, and there's also pastiche. But these are examples that we can help clarify the notion of fair use with. The things I have to say no to all the time are things like we're doing the senior video and we want to use name an artist, the music of today as background music. That's not necessarily transformative, that's more decorative. And so those are the things I find myself saying no to. However, I think that largely what we can do as librarians is to move away from being gatekeepers right now and to move more towards being cheerleaders when it comes to intellectual property. Let's talk about search a little bit right now. So new search tools emerged over the last year or year and a half. Instagrok is one of my favorites for younger kiddos. Anybody play with that one a lot? No, Russ does.
Fantastic.
It is. I don't think it's perfect, but it's a great starting point. Because if you are like me, very depressed over the absence of Google's Wonder Wheel, this is a nice substitute. It creates a mind map that's interactive. Click on any one of those bubbles, and it will open, and it will get you to more related bubbles. And what this does is it compensates for students' lack of knowledge, context knowledge, and a lack of vocabulary. So you're searching the Cold War and you've never heard of McCarthy. And you've never heard of any of the various different things. And what you can do here is you can grab facts and put them right on the mind map, and then you can keep a journal of your research if you set up a registration. But that's just one of the many things that are emerging in search. I find, now Google, what's going on with Google this week? Anybody notice that they've removed the left panel? It's really driving me crazy. And what's happening is now I've got to figure out, and this slide is only like, it's not that old, but, and it was relevant until about 3 days ago. But I left it up there because I wanted to tell you that everything's changed. I cannot find the filters for date anymore. And I don't get what's going on here. But I guess what I mean to say is that we need to teach kids how to use Google, how to interpret result lists, how to find those tools when they disappear, and how to be a little resilient when change happens. So the knowledge graph is something new, and kids can use it again to compensate for limited knowledge. But that also seems to appear and disappear at a moment's notice. This is super cool. Have you seen Google search by image, not Google image search? When you go to images.google.com now, there's going to be a little camera in your search box. And we're not only searching for text these days, we're also searching, we're trying to figure out what visuals mean. So when I grabbed that very famous photograph of the sailor kissing the lady in Times Square, the nurse in Times Square, and dragged it in, it automatically identified that photograph. If I put a Van Gogh painting in there, it'll automatically identify that painting. If I go with my students on a field trip and take a photograph of a fern on a fairly clear background, and bring that fern into the Google search box, it will identify it. There's really powerful new search strategies, and I want kids to understand them. Do you know what else people are using this one for? They're catching violations of use of intellectual property. So photographers whose original work is on the web are bringing their own work in, and they're seeing who else is using it, and they're going after them. So those kids who are taking images and using them unethically, that work is likely to be found these days a little bit more easily. Again, the leaders at University of Pennsylvania weren't even aware of Wolfram Alpha, and I'm absolutely in love with that. Have you played with that? I showed it to my son. He's in an MBA program, and he was comparing Yahoo and Google's corporate culture. And he put both companies in and was stunned at the comparison he got immediately. And Mashpedia is another one of my very favorite real-time search tools. Have you played with that much? I tell my kids, you know, I know you're going to go to Google, to Wikipedia first. Instead of that, go to Mashpedia, because in Mashpedia you not only get, it mashes up the various different real-time searches. So you not only get the Wikipedia article, but you get the news coming in from the various different news wires, from AP and Reuters. You get emerging video from YouTube and Vimeo. You get photographs that are being posted. So if something's happening in the Middle East and you need to get to the information quickly, this is going to do the job better than CNN or BBC, because it's grabbing the news wires before they process them. This blew my mind a few months ago. Have you seen this one? This is from the Internet Archive, that wonderful site that kind of archives every website that was ever done, and also has all sorts of fabulous archaic information. But what it did was it put up television news and made it searchable. So there's now a back archive for television news. It's growing older and older, and it's also growing newer and newer. So you can get little television news clips from all over the world with transcripts in various languages, and you can search it and you can analyze it. This is really a powerful portal for kids who are interested in what our world really looks like, because not all news is Western. I don't think Google is the best search tool anymore, and I used to really be convinced it was the best of the search engines. I don't actually think search engines are the best search tools anymore, because I think curation is the new search. And so when I am absolutely new to a topic and I don't need one of those quick answers, and I want to really scan what the experts think about a topic, I'm going to search it in a curation tool rather than a search engine. And I've been showing this to kids, and they are fascinated with it. And so one of the things that I show kids is that there's this world of librarians out there, university librarians, special librarians, public librarians, and school librarians, who are making all these LibGuides. And they're not just for their universities or their own communities. If you go to that LibGuides community and do a search, my example here is on autism, you will find that librarians have carefully curated these LibGuides that will work for you. You may not have every database that the community there has, but the material is really great, and somebody's really thought about how to present it, how to organize it, annotated it, and it's really an excellent starting point. Similarly, tools like Scoop It, if somebody is curating a subject, they care about it. So somebody who is curating autism on Scoop It is likely a parent who has an autistic child who's going to keep this up because he or she is really interested. Or a doctor. When I was scooping myself at the dentist's office the other day, my dentist asked me what I was doing. And I said, well, I was curating. And he said, well, what does that mean? And I told him, and he said, well, is anybody curating for periodontics? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, I think I want to do that. And so he's now curating for the periodontal world, getting current awareness and actually sharing with the rest of that world how to find information on that specific little niche. This is what the autism search looks like in Paperly. But do you see that you get a richer variety or an expert's take on a subject rather than just a Google quick answer? And the other thing that I think we're working on with kids is original research. You don't have to be a scholar to put together a Google form and do a survey and learn more about your topic based on people's opinions and what's going on in your world. And you don't have to only do your own school community. Through Twitter, we've gotten polls out that reached internationally from our little high school, and we've collected good data. This is just a slide that leads to our portals for world news, because I don't believe news is only local, and I want my kids who are doing our Middle East peace simulation to read the Jerusalem Post, to watch Al Jazeera, to look at the Palestinian Times. So, I haven't taken a breath in a while. So Howard Rangold also, I love his latest book, but InfoSmarts. but crap detecting is his phrase. How do we determine what truth looks like? I use the word triangulation with young kids, but I think what's our notion of who an expert is changing in a user-generated world. So to illustrate that, let's look at this
Your Honor,
film.
the defense calls as its first witness, Ms. Mona Lisa Vito.
Oh, I object, Your Honor. This person not on the witness list.
This witness is an expert in the field of automobiles and is being called to rebut the testimony of George Wilkes.
Your Honor, I object to this witness. Improper foundation. I'm not aware of this person's qualifications. I'd like to, voir dire this witness as to the extent of her expertise. Granted. Ms. Vito, what's your current profession?
I'm out of work, hairdresser.
What you do in your barber's garage?
Tune-ups, oil changes, brake relining, engine rebuilds, rebuild some trannies, rear-end.
Okay. But does being an ex-mechanic necessarily qualify you as being an expert on tire marks?
No. Thank you. Goodbye.
Sit down and the question.
No, it is a trick question.
Why is it a trick question? What's this?
Because Chevy didn't make a 327 in 55. The 327 didn't come out till 62. And it wasn't offered in the belly with the 4-barrel carb till 64. However, in 1964, the correct ignition timing will be 4 degrees before top dead center.
Well, she's acceptable, Your Honor.
Wikipedia is the best thing ever. Anyone in the world can write anything they want about any subject, so you know you are getting the best possible information.
I used to say that this notion of crap detecting was really black and white in the old days, and now we really have so many shades of gray, but I always get into trouble when I say that. But truly, I think it's time to stop demonizing Wikipedia and to start thinking about what the information task is. Debbie Avalock, in an article in Ed Leadership, says that in this participatory digital world, we're all novices at some point when judging who to trust. Appearance, credentials, and other indicators of quality that used to serve as shorthand tests of credibility don't really transfer online, don't easily transfer online. Debbie wrote a wonderful article that talked about how do we weigh truth within Wikipedia. And this is actually, I think, a really important skill. How do we look at a Wikipedia article and decide whether this one represents truth or not? And one of the things that happened in the course of the last 2 weeks was JSTOR gave a large part of its collection to the 100 most active Wikipedia editors to make sure that Wikipedia articles would have greater credibility. And so I think maybe we need to really rethink that. This just happens to be an infographic about Wikipedia, but what I've been seeing in the infographic world is a very strange notion of truth. Infographics, I think, are the most ripe material for teaching kids how to judge credibility. Nobody actually checks them. Often you get a bunch of URLs at the bottom of an infographic and you can't tell which statistic is attached to which URL, if you have sources at all. And so what I asked my graduate students to do was to take a favorite infographic and evaluate it. And it was really an interesting experience. They took the infographic, and we looked for copyright-friendly infographics, and then we brought them into a tool called ThingLink. How many of you have used that? It's super cool. So I don't know whether, should I show it to you? Yeah?
Yes.
I don't know what I don't know that this is probably not going to work right now. But what that does is it annotates. And so we were able to put dots and pop-up annotations on the infographics and share them with each other. They were really disappointing. And so I urge you, if you work with kids, don't use hoax sites. They're not authentic. But these are really, really great for authentic credibility checking. and they're viral. You can find them anywhere. And I think what they also do is help kids understand that all media needs to be deconstructed. All media are constructed messages, and all of these things are created to convince you of something, whether it's to buy a product or to believe in a strong argument. And we look at them as truth. We send them out on Twitter all the time, but they're not necessarily truth. Another thing that happened recently is EasyBib recently came up with an easy button for determining credibility. So you put the bookmark lid on the top in your bookmark bar, and you say, is this credible? It doesn't really know, but I've noticed my kids are starting to use it, and this particular thing really disturbs me, because judging credibility is not an easy button type of activity. I don't want kids to think that. What credibility has to do with right now is, what is the information task? When I was studying information science in graduate school, I had to learn about Python programming. And there was not very much stuff on Python programming out there on the web. Wikipedia led me to the experts and the very best stuff, and it wasn't in JSTOR. David Warlick tells us that those old handouts that we used to use for assessing credibility don't work anymore in a user-generated information environment. What really matters is, what is your information task? And some information is neither good nor bad, but how you use it. And so what I do is I think about what the best strategy is. If a student wants to use a source, this is my magic bullet. I say, annotate it. Let me know what you think about it. And here are some criteria for how to annotate it. So at the high school level, we have this district-wide form, actually it's a school-wide form, for annotating any source that a student deems worthy. And at the elementary level, we have the students ask 3 questions. Who wrote it? Why did they write it? And how does it help me answer my question or make my case? Just asking students to do this will up the level of sources that you've got in any of their works cited. I'm going to skip a few things here. Our notion of what a primary source has shifted. Has shifted. They used to look like these important old documents, but right now we have wonderful portals. This is the Eyewitness portal. Have you seen this from the University of Southern California? What they did was, the Shoah Foundation, the University of Southern California, went around and captured the eyewitness testimonies of Holocaust survivors. And so some of these folks are really old, but this is a rich archive of all sorts of material. There's curriculum there too. But you can take these videos, embed them, and use them as teaching tools. And then also, you know, we didn't used to deal with the notion of blogs as primary sources, but when you think about them, they really are primary sources. And so after the tsunami hit Japan, one of the most powerful primary sources that my students read was that nurse's blog. She was a first responder, and once it was translated into English, it was a great way to follow what was going on. But unfortunately, when my students were following some of the stories in the Middle East, not every blog was representative of truth. The gay girl in Damascus really turned out to be an American man in the Midwest. And just recently, we were faced with another experience of what truth looked like. Do you remember some of these images from Sandy? Do you remember the false tweets? Do you remember that the major news sources picked up all of this false information, and the Atlantic went through the images one by one and labeled them true, fake, true, fake? That was a rich information literacy experience that we worked on with our kids, just looking at how news happens. We think about hashtags as powerful tools for new research. When the tsunami hit, once we figured out what was the right hashtag, we could follow the story real time as it was happening internationally. That was something we couldn't do in the old days. Well, one of the other things we discovered recently was that the notion of twiplomacy. Most heads of states are either, well, they're not tweeting themselves, but there is a surrogate tweeting for every country. And it's not always hashtag Japan. You have to figure out who it is who's representing the country. So each year we do a Middle East peace simulation. And it was almost like John Henry versus the steam shovel. What was going on was we had them try to figure out, they were each heads of state. They had to find their head of state on Twitter. And once they did, it was like magic. Because they were getting press releases, the speeches, appearances. When they found out which was the real Bibi Netanyahu, they were led to everything that was coming out of the Knesset immediately. And so those students did way better than the students who were using the scholarly sources. They needed those sources for background, but in terms of being really up to date for this peace simulation, this was the best way to approach it. I'm going to skip that. There are some new measures for credibility in social networking. This one came out just a few months ago. It's called your cred score. Have you seen this? Search yourself in cred and see what your score is. Now, I don't put a lot of weight in these numbers, but when you put yourself in there, you can see who you influence, who influences you, and this actually lets you get under the hood and see how the metrics are developed. It's really, really powerful. So you would think, well, this is no big deal. But when my students find an article written by anybody, name the person, what I'm going to have them do from now on is put the name into this cred story and have them see everything about that person, where they're active, what people are saying about them. It's, in the old days I used to have them, okay, put their name in quotation marks in Google and let's see if we can find a little bit about their credentials. This is way better. You're going to get a whole picture of pretty much their entire life online. And that's not true just of popular journalists. We can assess scholars' work a lot better than we ever were able to before. Google, as long as you set yourself up, if you're an academic and you set yourself up with a Google Scholar profile, this is mine. I haven't written as much as I'd like to, but I'm planning to write a lot of academic stuff. But I started putting up my Google Scholar profile, and you can see the pattern of my articles, who's reading them, who's citing them, and this is powerful information. And you can also find people to collaborate with this way. So Google Scholar is one of these strategies for assessing the activity of an academic. But look at this. I went into Microsoft Academic Search. This is really powerful. And Dr. Kulthau and Dr. Todd are my subjects here. And you can see the pattern of their publications. You can click on any publication and see a visual of who cited it, where they've cited it, geographic stuff. It's really interesting, different metrics. All right, so skip a few things. Even in these curation sites, there are metrics of credibility. There may not be perfect metrics, but in Scoop It, to see if a curator has credibility, there's a little green square that gives you a number. That number has to do with the currency of the curation effort and how many people are following it. So when my students are trying to figure out which of these scoops on autism I should follow, that credibility metric might be useful. Let's think about questioning and inquiry. One of the things I think kids really need to know is that you can't Google everything, and you shouldn't Google everything, because it's really about a process. It's about the question. And information is not the destination, it's part of the bigger journey toward knowledge. And so asking the right question can be really important, as Elle found out in Legally Blonde.
Jenny, why is it that Tracy Marcinko's curls were ruined when she got hers down?
Because they got wet?
Exactly. Because isn't it the first cardinal rule of perm maintenance that you're forbidden to wet your hair for at least 24 hours after getting a perm, at the risk of deactivating the ammonium thioglycolate?
Yes.
And wouldn't somebody who's had, say, 30 perms before in their life be well aware of this rule? And if in fact you weren't washing your hair, as I suspect you weren't because your curls are still intact, wouldn't you have heard the gunshot? And if in fact you had heard the gunshot, broke window, wouldn't have had time to hide the gun before you got downstairs, which would mean that you would have had to have found Mrs. Wyndham with a gun in her hand to make your story plausible. Is it?
Those are good questions, right? So we want to get our kids to ask good questions. There are so many models of inquiry, and we want our students to think about these things as a process. In fact, we want our students to think like detectives. We want our students to think like journalists. We want our students to think like scientists. We want them to think like citizens of their country and like citizens of the world. We want them to think like artists, creators. And so that leads us into creativity. I want my kids to behave like the engineers at NASA did during the Apollo 13
CO2 levels are going to be getting
crisis.
toxic. Well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole. Rapidly.
Okay, people, listen up. People upstairs handed us this one, and we gotta come through. We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that. Let's get it organized.
Okay, let's build a filter.
So this is an authentic assessment. This is better than a bubble test. Can we teach kids to think creatively when they're under pressure, in a time when it really matters? Making stuff, I think, is the killer app. It used to be that only journalists could publish, but now everyone has a printing press, everyone can produce a story, everyone can have influence. A young boy in California is now internationally known because of his creativity with cardboard, and he started a cardboard hoarding panic with kids all over the world trying to create fabulous things. Have you seen Kane's Arcade? Oh my God, go watch this story. I can't keep a box in the library because parents are trying to hoard this cardboard. He became famous because audience changes everything. And one of the things I'm convinced about is that the old model of the library, library is a grocery store, library is a place to get stuff, is no longer true. Libraries are more like kitchens. They are no longer transactional or just transactional. They're transformational. They're participatory. Collection looks a lot different than it used to. These are just some of the things that are in our collection that we take out of the closet every morning. Our libraries are becoming learner-centered learning commons, production centers, I-centers. Scenes from my library over the course of the day, dancing, playing. Part of my collection are new tools. And so I make available to kids the tools that they need, that they can use to create with. And these are part of our digital collection, gathering this stuff together, curating these options for kids. Recently, we started projects with those infographics. We decided not only should kids be able to deconstruct them, but they should construct them as media messages. And so we curated a wonderful, I think it's a wonderful page, a lesson on how to create an infographic. And we use tools like this, and what you see on the left is just one of the student products on the Somali pirates. This was an amazing experience for me because it really showed me, we did this with honor students, and they were angry with me. These were honor students, senior honor students, and they really wanted to write a paper, or they wanted to create a standard digital story. And this was completely outside of their comfort zone. So what we did, because this didn't work very well the semester before, we had to group the students well, because the collaboration was really the story here. We needed to figure out who were the kids who were great with design and Photoshop. We needed to figure out who were the kids that were great with crunching numbers. We needed to figure out who were the kids who were going to keep the group going and who was going to work on the citation. And the way we grouped them was critically important in this. And once we had those kids divided, not all the Photoshop kids or the arty kids in one group, not all the number crunchers in one group, the products really made sense. And then we started brainstorming because we'd never done this before. And we wanted their works cited to look like it was, like it really was thoughtful. And so what the kids discovered was that Noodle Tools actually downloaded right into Google Docs. And they said, okay, Dr. V, we'll just put the Google Docs citation there, and they'll have anybody who sees our infographic online will be able to click on it. And then another kid said, well, that will make it look ugly, so let's do a tiny URL. And so basically they did this problem solving, and they created really professional looking, thoughtful, respectful of intellectual property infographics, and they're all online if you want to see those artifacts of the student work. And although they hated me, in the end they liked the product and the project. Another thing that we're discovering is when we're making these new things, we don't have assessments for them. They're not standard. I love Bernadine Porter's Digital Assessment Generator because it has all sorts of criteria that really measure authentic student products. And these digital stories are very, very powerful. We used a very common product. We used VoiceThread with our ESL students this year. And what we didn't understand about those kids was that they never really told us the stories of their coming to America. We heard parts of it. But once we gave them a microphone and we told them to gather their family photographs and tell us what really happened, we discovered what happened to the orphan boys in the Ukraine and how different their worlds are now. They've never been in a car before. The young woman who left Tibet, we didn't know anything about her life. And you can visit these stories, and we actually shared them with the rest of the school, and then all of a sudden, those kids who were walking around the halls by themselves, people knew their stories, and people befriended them. It was sharing stories is a remarkable thing. So this year we decided we were going to expand our makerspace, and this is what my reference area looked like a few months ago. And so I asked the kids to help me plan the transformation. And so we did. We wrote a wish list, they wrote a software wish list, and then they invented. What they did was they created something completely different. I said, I don't really want to lose the reference books. I'm still very attached to them. And they said, don't worry, Dr. V, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put the counter over the reference shelf, so we'll make a lip that goes 12 inches over on one side and 12 inches over on the other side, and that way we can put our new cafe-style stools underneath, and you can still have your books, and we can still have those books. And then they came up with, I don't know if you can see it in that photograph, but they came up with a swivel screen. So the production space is on one side, and so you can see the screen from the production area, but you can also swivel the screen, and for the audience area, you can see it. These are really creative ideas. I don't think the vendor even had an idea that these things were possible. We also put these out. We found these cool receptacles, and we put them out all over the library, and that really encourages kids to bring in their mobile devices and just sort of pop in. It's the only place in the school. And we also now lend, as part of our collection, a green screen. We retrofitted the old round tables, lifted them up, and created a pedestal through which we could put cables. And I'm not going to show you this, but Curation is something Heidi Hayes Jacobs is thinking about an awful lot. She thinks the best assessment for kids right now is to have them solve a problem by creating an app. And I'd love to start doing that with the kids. Let's just listen to a part of this. We'll move on to connectivity.
Yeah, hang up, Kim, so I can spread the word. Okay, buyers.
You remember this?
What's the story?
Okay.
What's the glory? What's the tale? Nightingale. Did you hear about you going, Kim?
Well, that's how kids used to be networked. Right now, things are a little different. This is something I think about a lot. George Stevens tells us the network is learning. And I think that's true. One of the things I've done with my grad course recently is I talked about VoiceThread for my ESL students. But recently I decided to use it as a communication tool. So I pose a question, and then everybody has a conversation around the slide. And so I can actually hear their voices in an online class. It's outside of Illuminate, it's not real time, but my students have gotten used to this type of question and answer thing, and it's really reflective, and they can actually hear the voice of the other person, put the mic down, think about it, and then come up with a thoughtful response. I love this. Have you seen this infographic? I've been bashing infographics, but I love this one. These are the most popular hashtags out there for teachers. And I'm really, really proud. It's very small and it's purple. It's sort of towards the bottom middle. TL Chat, the hashtag that we started about 2 years ago for teacher librarians, is on there. It made the infographic. But I also love this infographic. I have it printed and put up in the library because I can point my teachers to various different hashtags that will improve their practice and help them begin to develop a PLN. These are just some of the hashtags that I find useful. I've been very involved with a bunch of these recently. But I think that kids need a PLN or an academic network too. What happened, have you seen this, guys? How many of you know about MOOCs? Yeah, MOOCs, when I wrote an article for School Library Journal a couple weeks ago on the top 10 tech trends of the year, I wrote to them about MOOCs, and they said, man, MOOCs are massive on open online courses. And the proof of concept was a course a couple of years ago on artificial intelligence that 160,000 people signed up for. Imagine that. And it was successful. This summer I took a MOOC on online searching, but just 2 weeks ago, the University of Miami Global Academy introduced a MOOC for SAT biology test prep. And it's free, and it's live, and it looks real. I actually registered to take it myself, so I've been peeking in on it. But this is just the beginning. Our kids can get to learning beyond the walls of our schools and libraries. And I think it's up to us as librarians to share these opportunities, because that kid who's interested in name that unusual thing, right? What is it? The Australian didgeridoo. Of course, might want to study that, and maybe there'll be a MOOC for that. But he or she won't know about that opportunity unless a librarian presents it to him or her. So MOOCs are coming down the road. And not only MOOCs, but badges. How many of you have been reading about badges? Badges are digital assessments. You sign up and you learn something somewhere, and there's a number of major foundations that are really behind the notion of expanding badges. So a kid learns about a particular type of coding or programming and gets a badge. That badge comes with meta tags. So when that student actually puts that resume together, that resume will, every website that he or she has will have that badge. Click on that badge and you'll see just what that student knows. It's much more powerful than a line on a CV or a resume. And I can see some of my students really beginning to collect badges. YALSA is now offering badges for expertise and work with young adults. So you can take courses and get badges and put them on your own CVs. So that's coming down the road, and I think we need to be, and there it is. This is the information about the YALSA badges. Talking about connectivity, we have the power to bring into our classrooms and libraries people we only dreamed of connecting with before. After my kids read Thousand Splendid Suns, we've had Soraya Paksad, an Afghani women's rights leader, come in and talk to them via Skype about Sharia law. The book is the book's an important book, but it is, compared to talking with her, it's a flat experience. This makes the book come alive, and we have the power to put somebody like that in our collection. That's part of collection as well. Books are networked in ways that we never imagined, and I think that Eliza Dresang was prescient when she wrote Radical Change back in 1999, because it's only gotten hugely big. I had my kids, I talked to my kids, I did an article for Ed Leadership last year, and I asked them about how they're reading. And I discovered with Wendy Stevens that there's this underground reading culture that I didn't know about, that kids are connecting with authors in ways I didn't know about. So I asked one of them, I asked Jessie to draw her relationship with John Green, and this is what she drew. She's holding his hand. She's looking at her print book and her ebook, her device, because what she told me is I have to have some books in both formats. It was like having the print book was a type of talisman. Yes, I can read and I can move across my devices, but in addition to my ebook, in addition to reading it on various platforms, there are these books that I want to have on my shelf. And so what's going on is they are connecting with authors in wild and crazy ways. On January 15th, John Green is going to have an evening of awesome at Carnegie Hall. 3 of my kids are actually, they have tickets, but I just signed up for a live simulcast. So that evening I'm going to have a pizza party, and the rest of us will meet with John Green as well. John and Hank, of course. But that's not it. Andrew Slack is from my neighborhood. My kids grew up with him. He started Dumbledore's Army. Hundreds of thousands of kids around the world are trying to do good in the name of Dumbledore. And they're doing good in the name of the nerd fighters. And they were aware of the censorship of Laurie Halse Anderson's Speak. And they're involved and active in these areas. This is Michelle Ludela's catalog, and kids are having conversations about books on their online catalogs, on the OPACs. World Read Aloud Day was fabulous. We just gathered together libraries around the country, and we invited authors. They Skyped in, and there's James Kennedy Skyping in with us reading. Skype and Author Network is another opportunity for kids to connect with authors and feel they're immediately there. This is a somewhat virtual book club. Just like this, we decided that we would connect 5 book clubs. I had 5 librarian friends in different parts of the country, and we each had small book clubs, and we decided to meet on a time that everybody could do it. The time zones were a little tricky, but we had book discussions together. Nerdy kids all over the country connecting over books via Skype and pizza. And we've been using S'mores as a platform for advertising our books. And I just want to show you, they use the hashtags. This is what happened when Librarian entered the chat room.
The men were very hard, although tension was a lot of fun.
I mean, there was such joy in that room. So we had Lauren Myracle and Liv Bray, and don't tell them, but Laurie Halse Anderson's coming in too. And she's it's gonna be super exciting. Anyway. All right, next movie. And I promise I'm getting towards the end. Are you guys bored?
This is no place for you, Q. Go home.
Oh, don't be an idiot, 007. I know exactly what you're up to, and quite frankly, you're going to need my help. Remember, if it hadn't been for Q Branch, you'd have been dead long ago. Everything for a man on holiday.
What does Q do?
He's the inventor. He's the gangster.
And then what does he do with the stuff?
Gives it to James Bond.
Yes, because he's a curator. Q is a curator, and so are we. And so let's look at curation, because I think we're moving from DDC to DCC, or digital collection curation. When Mitchell Kapor said getting information off the internet is like taking a drink from a fire hydrant, he couldn't have even imagined user-generated content and what that would look like. Because right now, we're curating stuff that looks like this, all of that stuff. That's all part of our collection. Not only that, if we're doing this right, we're curating all the open educational resources that are out there, because that stuff's too good to waste. It's too good to ignore. It's too good not to collect. And then we're curating the curation tools, because I'm teaching kids how to curate. But I'm also trying to negotiate which of these tools work best for which part of my collection, because it's so exciting. Curation is essential, with librarians going across more than one school, with us reaching kids 24/7. I want my library to be available at the point of need, and that's why digital collection curation is so important. Guru is another example of curation. It's a fabulous, it gathers together the open educational resources for us. And so as I'm doing this, I think very, very explicitly about what this means for kids, because they have to be curators too. When you think about it, these containers are no longer adequate for student research. And so we need to teach them how to collect information. I think that if we teach kids how to curate, we teach them how to be trusted guides. We develop digital literacies, we have them make sense of the information world, we allow them to take a leadership role and develop a niche, and take responsibility for their own learning. These are some of my kids' curation efforts from last semester. Notice that these are subjects in which they're seriously interested, and notice that Tenzin, the student I talked to you about from Tibet, is curating in Tibetan and Hindi. Very few people are doing this, and she is serving a purpose. She is curating for a free Tibet. This is what the TL chat looks like. And this is something called Storify, and I use this for conferences. This allows you to curate tweets and images and really tell the story of what happens chronologically at an event or at a conference. And it's a really lovely real-time curation tool. Kids are using wikis and Google Sites to gather their research, and I think they should be because those notebooks don't work anymore. And I'm having kids curate textbooks. So we're making kids responsible for chapter 37 or for helping to gather the information together to study for an SAT exam. I'm in love with MentorMob. And Ross, have you played with this much? Yeah. I'm in love with it. It allows me to create playlists for my students, for my grad students, and for my high school students. And you can see on there that these are my grad students' work, but what I've done for my high school students, for instance, these really casual curations or playlists. So my Gay Straight Alliance meets every month, and one of the things they wanted to study was how gay people have been treated in situation comedies over the last 10 years. And so what we did was we curated a playlist of those of clips of situation comedies, and the kids were able to go through them and analyze them. It was just a really handy way to look at the information. Kids can now curate textbooks with a tool called Boundless. This is just the beginning. It started with university textbooks in a limited amount of subjects, but what it tries to do is aggregate open educational resource content from some of the universities, and it mimics the proprietary textbooks. So you grab an ISBN from Amazon, for instance, paste it in, and it will try to create a textbook that looks like that proprietary textbook. It's not perfect yet, but it's getting there. It'll be a while, but it's something to look at. Pinterest is something I dismissed initially, but I'm discovering so many wonderful things. ASCD is now pinning fabulous content relating to curriculum. This Pinterest board is about school principals and leadership ideas. Eric Shaninger, you probably know him, a principal in New Jersey, is pinning for administrators. And this is called Rebel Mouse. This is my new homepage. I think this is the homepage for everybody. During the course of the day, everything that I do, I'm not supposed to move, everything that I do pops up on my Rebel Mouse page. This is an example. Pointer, the journalism community, is using Rebel Mouse as a way to aggregate what it's been writing about and the new stuff that happens every day. But this is almost like your business card now, your Rebel Mouse. And then we're thinking, of course, about the Common Core and what librarians can do to help out and to lead. I'm aggregating and curating Common Core resources for the teachers, what they need. People are I'm not the only one doing this. This is Carolyn Starkey's. We've got the crosswalk. And then I'm working with teachers to create lessons that support the Common Core. This is a lesson that I was so excited about that we did last month that was about visual note-taking, note sketching. and how to use visual note-taking to promote understanding of complicated text. And it's a fun lesson. I hope you get a chance to take a look at it. Mark Aronson talks about the art of clustering nonfiction with a variety of materials. And I think, I was talking to Ross about this at dinner, I think that there's a really great potential for virtual clustering because it's so scalable. Imagine clustering ebooks, full-text ebooks, with nonfiction articles on various different pages. We can really take a lead in doing nonfiction clustering digitally. And then let's talk about portability. This is my favorite clip. I'm going to come to, this is almost over, I promise.
Yes, coffee please. I also want something to go.
Yes.
You have any grilled cheese sandwiches?
Yes, sir.
Well, let me have 1,000. And 300 tuna fish and 200 bacon lettuce and tomato sandwiches.
You want to let you some rye?
490 on rye. We have 110 on whole wheat and 300 on white bread.
Fernandez wanted on roll.
One on roll.
The tuna?
All the tuna on whole wheat and all the bacon, lettuce and tomato. Let me have a toast.
You get the idea. That goes on for a while. But we want things to be portable as well. Our kids want things to be portable as well. The mobile device will be the primary connection tool to the internet for most people in the year 2020. And so what are we thinking about? I don't think it's good enough for our kids to just have their favorite games on their mobile devices. I think our kids need to have libraries in their pockets. I think every kid deserves to have libraries in their pockets. I was so surprised again when I went to talk to those administrators. Nobody knew that their school's collections, their databases could be on their students' mobile apps. The Gale Access My Library apps are so fabulous. And if you don't have that app from the App Store, download it tonight. This is what my kids look at when they look at their reference collection on their iPads and their phones. So when they're at soccer, they can get into opposing viewpoints, collect the articles that they need, and send them to themselves via email so they can actually manipulate them and process them when they get home. This stuff is really powerful, and it shows the library to the home community as really powerful because we really are coming home and to soccer and to work and everywhere with our kids. So I believe every kid should have a library in his or her pocket and on their tablets. And this is another app that I'm in love with. This is the Yalza Teen Book Finder. Have you seen that one? So my kids now take their iPads to the shelves with them, they've been doing that with Goodreads for a long time. I see them in the stacks with their iPads looking at these wonderful book recommendation sites. But this is a list of every Yalza award-winning book, and it's divided by genre, by year, by award. Do you like that, Marie? Yeah.
Love it. I didn't know about that. I actually love Weezy Bat. It's one of my favorite books.
Oh, it's mine too. I do too. It's so lyrical. And for younger kids, they should have the International Children's Digital Library as an app. So in addition to those kinds of library apps, are we suggesting a collection for our kids to download? So at the beginning of the school year, can we help classroom teachers develop a library of apps that are really rich and representative of inquiry and good knowledge? Are we putting, this is my prototype, I would like to work a little bit more on this. It's my library mobile site, and kids can access almost all of my library on their mobile devices. But I really don't think it's pretty enough. I want it to be as pretty as the most beautiful app, and I want somebody to help me with it. And I want the kids to help design it. And I think research is now changing. Research can be transparent, interactive, original, meaningful. Kids can have influence, kids can participate. I want our kids.
Buenos Aires. Great.
able to take a stand. I want them to understand both their powers and their responsibilities. I want them not only to try.
You do nothing that I say. You must unlearn what you have learned.
All right, I'll give it a try.
No, try not. Do or do not. There is no try.
This year, kids have shown us that they can make a real difference in their world. Malala stood up and spoke out for the right of young women to have an education, and a day was devoted to her internationally. 5 girls in the UK spoke out against female genital mutilation, and their voices were heard around the world. Our kids at my local high school spoke out to defend the loss of opera at our local theater. Our students spoke out against genocide. This is a video that it's too long to show right now. But I think we should determine our role in this big movie of ours. And I think we have to understand that all of these things I'm talking about tonight are opportunities for us to make a difference in the lives of young people because we're important.
What are you doing here?
Oh, look, I may not be an explorer, or an adventurer, or a treasure seeker, or a gunfighter, Mr. O'Connell, but I am proud of what I am.
And what is that?
I am a librarian.
And so, here's my hope. I hope that in addition to counting the number of AP classes the school offers, or the number of 4s or 5s its students score, that we also assess their efficacy as thoughtful investigators and storytellers, as participants, that we assess the skills that have the longest legs. You know, I'm a librarian, and I'm not going to discover a cure for cancer, and I won't write the next Pulitzer Prize winning book, and I'm not going to direct the next award-winning indie film, but I know that I'll have students who will do that kind of work. And I hope that their work makes a difference, and I hope that my work makes a difference. And you don't need to do a hell of a lot of research to discover that ours is a species that some believe is endangered. And that's too bad, because it's sad for the growing number of learners who do not have access and may never have access to a shifted library or a powerful library program. I'm a librarian. It's never been a more exciting, more rewarding, or more important time to be a librarian, and learners have never needed us more. I think this is just the beginning. I'll play this last little clip that I played before at Rutgers, but I hope you don't mind.
Someday I'll build a Librarian and share myself with all my friends. It's global. With the web 2 on my laptop, I'll gather pages drop by drop for information. Wars,
I've given you some things to think about tonight, and I hope you like our little exploration of movies and and kids and new strategies for learning. So, does anybody have any questions?
Do you have some questions?
Sort of. Yes. Wow. First of all, wow. What
Aren't
a
there a
vision.
lot of things to think about?
There's an immense amount of things to think about, and this vision is overwhelming, and my head's spinning a little, so if you'll bear with me to
Popcorn.
process my question,
Yeah.
and maybe comment. I heard you say at the beginning that you were uncomfortable with the way that the students dealt with the suicide or the multiple suicides in your school by not dealing with people, but dealing in digital format. They were dealing on the Twitter sphere. But it seems like their whole life is lived digitally. So are we not then kind of facilitating that move away from the real world into a more digital reality and dealing with things that we would normally expect people to go face to face to do?
Right.
Should we be surprised that they're doing that?
No, I'm not surprised, but I think we're negotiating new norms for what behavior looks like in various different spaces. So, you know, what does classroom management look like, and what are expectations looking like when we're in a group? And I think teachers and librarians are really beginning to figure out how to express that. Like right now, I need to literally say, take your phone, and actually I may even use that envelope thing. Take your phones, put them in the envelope, and I don't want to see them for the next 40 minutes. Or take your laptop and put it at 45 degrees. Right now, we're going to look at each other and we're going to have a conversation. But there are times for that, and then there are times that it's okay to be engaged. The digital stories that I shared with you from those ESL students, powerful stuff. I mean, we don't want to take away from that, but we need to establish classroom norms and library norms, and that it is important to unplug.
I think that's the tension that I'm feeling, though,
Yeah.
because there's times when we should have them unplug, but then we have to deal with the tension that you mentioned about how they can't. It's like taking away heroin from an addict. They go through a withdrawal, so then you're really not getting their attention because their attention is on the fact that my digital device is disconnected from me.
Yeah.
And then we have that digital divide of those people, those students who have the digital devices and those that do not. So we have this great tension between all of this wonderful new reality, but we still have that divide. Is that going to grow greater as we develop more of these tools that are so wonderful?
I don't know. What do you guys think?
Does your students do you teach your students etiquette?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, I think that's my role. I don't think how many of you are in schools? Okay, I don't think anyone else is doing that. And so sometimes it's an over-the-shoulder thing, and sometimes it's formal, and sometimes I have to stop a whole class and say, let's have a conversation about this because this is bothering me. And sometimes it's a formal thing, like when I have the juniors in to do a college search, we talk a lot, I do a full block on digital reputation and digital reputation management. So, but there's a bunch of curricula out there that are really powerful. Henry Jenkins and Howard Gardner put out a wonderful curriculum recently with realistic, not the sort of things where adults are trying to like understand what social media looks like. They really got it, and they put together great stuff, including like draw your, they have this kind of image where you're supposed to draw what your social network looks like. What is your, if you could create an avatar for what you represent to people online, what would it look like? And maybe not show it to us, but let's talk about these things. Who do you represent yourself as? But there was just so many lessons there. Common Sense Media is a wonderful repository for all sorts of good learning that's about etiquette and digital citizenship, and they have these really great videos that you can use and conversation starters. Lots of good stuff.
Do you feel that students are aware of etiquette, but they don't practice it? And then on the flip side of it, is that teachers to some extent are not really aware of it? They don't really know they don't know how to engage it or how to even approach it because they don't know what it is.
I think a lot of teachers don't even know that there's there's a primary screen, and it's not the screen that the students are really supposed to be on. And I think that, I know what those kids are doing in the lab, and often it's not what they're supposed to be. They're not doing research, but that Twitter thing's going all the time. And so the awareness of it and having them know, I know that's what you want to do, but right now for the next 20 minutes we're focused on this. And you need to alert teachers, because I don't think they're all aware. The behavior of, I know that everybody's doing this while I'm talking most of the time. It's definitely something we're facing in the classroom, and we're really struggling to deal with. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think maybe their concept of plugged in versus not plugged in is quite different.
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
I think their concept of plugged in versus not plugged in is quite different from.
Can you tell me?
I mean, adults are plugged in too, but in a different way. And the thing with the tweets, I wondered if that was just another way for them to breathe. And also together, but it is together, even though it's not together.
I was struggling with that, because I felt that at first, but every tweet was saying the same thing. And it wasn't necessarily, there was not very much consolation going on. But then I was thinking, well, when somebody passes, we're struggling, we don't know what to say either. And so it's almost like these things that are developing are these memorials. You see them on Facebook, and you also see them on Twitter. And it's, I have to sign the guest book at the church or the synagogue. That's what it felt like to me. And I do think to some degree it was therapeutic, but I also thought I lost an opportunity by not grabbing a group of them together and actually sitting down and doing something face to face. I think I needed to intervene and do something, even though I'm not trained to do that kind of work. Gosh, I hesitate to put that thing in there, because it really just sort of brings us down.
Well, we had the same thing at our high school. We had a Facebook page, a Facebook group that was joined by all the school leaders, all our peer leaders, and one kid friended a kid who friended another kid who friended one of us, and so it was uncovered. And it just really sort of precipitated this whole cathartic kind of school, meetings and workshops, and sitting down with the people, having the people who really said these hurtful things with the people that had said them out, and it was really a very positive experience. But to this day, I was so glad that you said that, because to this day I have a very hard time dealing with it, or talking about it, not dealing with it, but talking about it, because it's like you're blaming it. They were doing the same thing. They were targeting teachers. They were targeting core citizen teachers, and actually some teachers' kids. They, had strong opinions about. But it ended up being a very positive process, and it made me really think that most schools have that happening on one level or another. I just think it very often doesn't, reach the surface. I think very often